Wow, thank you. That's some introduction. Thank you very much, Pastor Danny. I truly appreciate it. And I am grateful to be back. Also, this is my second Gay Christian Network conference. Last year was my first. And I welcome all you first-timers here, and I hope that you find it as helpful and encouraging as I did last year. This is an amazing view of how many people. I had no idea. It would be quite so many. Wow. But I do welcome all you first-timers, and I do hope that you will find all the love and kindness that is around here supporting you, and you can really absorb it and enjoy it this weekend. I especially am grateful to Trey and to Justin for giving me this great opportunity and a privilege, really, to come and share my son Tyler Clementi's story, as well as a little bit of a few of my hard-learned lessons that have transformed me and have strengthened my faith and ultimately have started me on a journey of healing, finally. To start with, Tyler was so much more than the headlines that captured his name in the fall of 2010. He was a thoughtful friend and a kind and loving son and brother as well. He truly was a very special and precious young man. Of course, I am a little biased because I am his mom, but also it's very hard for me to speak about a human being and just limit it to just a few adjectives or a few short sentences. But some of the things that pop into my mind when I think about Tyler is how curious and adventurous he was. He was always looking for answers and planning a new journey. He loved to put things together and find solutions. He was very, very creative. He had a tremendous, generous spirit and was very smart and articulate, of course. Every mom would say all these things, I'm sure. But he also had a cheerful and wonderful, easygoing disposition and personality. I remember him always seeming to have a smile on his face, always waking up with a smile. And at the time, I kind of thought it was, meaning his way of embracing the day and knowing that he could go into the day and everything was going to be good. But what I also came to realize was how Tyler also learned to hide himself from the world. And that world included me too, unfortunately. And I think maybe he found it easier to hide himself behind a smile than behind a frown. So I really don't know where that smile came from. But what I've also think is that his easygoing personality also helped make him be our peacekeeper in our family. He's the youngest of 3 siblings. He had 2 older brothers. And he was the one that could diffuse the situation. Maybe his older siblings were a little more competitive. They were a little closer in age, and maybe because Tyler was the youngest, they were slightly gentler with Tyler and maybe a little more forgiving towards Tyler. But one thing that I think Tyler and I did share is that we are both very private and humble people. We never seek attention. He never desired to stand out in the crowd. We're much more comfortable blending in. I belong somewhere in the middle out there. I still can't believe, nor would I ever desire, to be standing up here in front of so many people. Needless to say, to share something as personal as my family and my son, that's just something that I never could wrap my brain around. But nonetheless, here I am. And unlike me, Tyler did love to perform. Tyler's true passion was music, and he was a very gifted and talented violinist. So when he had his violin in his hands, he did like to have all ears centered on him. That much I do know he did like. But other than our little small area of the world, little part in New Jersey, basically he was unknown, and that is until the fall of 2010. It was shortly after Tyler had started his freshman year at Rutgers University that his roommate webcammed him in a sexual encounter with another man. And then his roommate tweeted about the encounter, announcing to the entire world a very personal moment that should have remained just that, a private encounter. I can only imagine that these bullying actions must have caused Tyler to feel humiliated and and ashamed and maybe even thinking something that his sexual orientation was something to be laughed at. One thing that we have come to realize is that as Tyler continually logged into the posts and the tweets, we learned that he logged in over 59 times in a short 5 or 6 day period, and that didn't even count the amount of screenshots that he had taken of the tweets that he could continually look into. And we realized that by doing that, he actually lost and his reality became very twisted and distorted. He only became interested in and consumed with and concerned with the words of people who were trying to humiliate him. And he could no longer see the special and precious person that he was. These bullying actions must have caused Tyler to feel very isolated and alone, worthless, and probably very desperate. Because it was at this point that Tyler made a permanent decision to a very temporary situation, a decision that Tyler can never go back and change. On September 22nd, 2010, Tyler died by suicide. He was only 18 years old. And as much as I would give anything to go back in time and change Tyler's actions, I know that that is not possible. So instead, my husband and I have decided to move forward. And we've decided that what we needed to change was the attitudes and mindsets of people who thought that it was acceptable to set up a camera or to send out tweets that said, "Come join in and watch the show," because those are not acceptable. We wanted to prevent, and still do, anyone else from ever feeling the pain, shame, or humiliation that Tyler must have felt that caused him to make a decision and think that he had no other choices. Because no one should ever have to suffer the way Tyler did before he ended his life. And with the help of many, many good people that God provided and surrounded us with, we were able to move forward and to continue Tyler's legacy and establish the Tyler Clementi Foundation that Pastor Dan alluded to. And our mission is to end all online and offline bullying in schools, workplaces, and faith communities. And this was certainly not something that I thought about initially, in all truthfulness. But I gradually came to see that Tyler's death had started many, many conversations. And these conversations seemed to have a positive impact, moving us forward along on the road to equality, and maybe even towards acceptance and inclusion in some of our faith communities. I wanted these conversations to continue, because conversations are good. They are essential in order to create change. And I think it's important to realize that there's a difference between conversation and gossip, because none of these issues were ever talked about amongst my Christian friends, mostly because I think they think it's gossip. But we have to understand the difference. Gossip tears people down and destroys other people. But conversations illuminate and elevate issues and help people to better understand topics. By bringing a topic out into the light, it takes away the stigma of shame and embarrassment. And it also allows people to know that there is nothing wrong with who they are or who they love, or that it is not unusual to have times of mental health struggles. By having these conversations, it allows people also to be better able to find the help and resources that they have available to them. The interest in Tyler's story led to much media attention, and it was at a time when I really couldn't think or even really care about it. But as I've woken up and come out of my fog, I actually view that attention as a blessing, a disguised blessing at first, since it meant that we as a family didn't have to come out. We came out all at once, all across the headlines of most of the papers. And it was easier that way. We didn't have to deal with who to tell, who not to tell, walking gingerly out into that space. Also, what I believe is really, really grateful is that this way I didn't have to go looking for help and resources and support, because everybody came to me. And that included some well-known organizations like Mitchell Gold, founder of Faith in America, Matthew Vines from the Reformation Project. So I had great resources and support around me. And it also meant that there were local people in my local area that also were able to support me. One person who became a really good friend and resource for me was a person who I actually had known for quite a while. Our paths kept crossing. We actually went to the same non-denominational Bible study for many years, and then I kind of separated from that because I had to go back to work. The kids were getting older. But there was still that connection, but yet I had no idea that she had a gay son, because in the circles that I was in, no one talked about family members or friends who were gay. It was just like an untalked about subject. So in 2010, what I found was many parents, especially Christian parents, were in a closet, a deep, deep closet. And unfortunately, because no one was talking about it, it was really hard, because when Tyler had come out to me, that was one of the first things I really wanted, was to talk to another Christian mom. And there were none around me, because no one was talking. So I wanted, what I was looking for was a Christian mom, so that somebody I could talk to that would understand that I was very confused and I was upset. And I wanted someone to listen to me and allow me to share my thoughts and my feelings. And I didn't want them to judge me, but rather come beside me, maybe with their own experiences and their own lessons learned. And this is why I find it so important that families must come out of that closet. And it is also for this reason that I share my story tonight and in other locations, because I'm hoping that maybe someone might hear something that I'm say that will make the conversation that they might have one day just a little bit easier. And for that respect, I think this event is great, because if anybody is coming to this, there is a wealth of support here. There's a, as Trey asked parents to stand, they're all around here, great support, and just the kind of support that I was looking for. So all you have to do is, I think, look for one of the Mama Bear badges or the Mom Hugs, and you will find the support that you are looking for. Because looking back, the simple truth was that I was not prepared for what Tyler was going to tell me when he came out to me late that night in August, just 36 hours before he was leaving for college. Strangely, I had been waiting for his older brother to come out to me for years. And yet, I had no clue that Tyler was gay. I guess my gaydar was broken, I don't know. But what I do wish now is that I had been better prepared then. Because when Tyler came out to me, what shocked me most and really broke my heart was that he seemed to think that he could not be Christian and be gay. This totally confused me, because I knew without question that Tyler was a Christian. He had accepted Christ as his Lord and Savior when he was a very young child. He was about 4 years old. And God clearly confirmed that to me at the time when Tyler professed his faith. So I did not understand how he seemed to think he couldn't be Christian. And the only words that came to me that night when Tyler was speaking to me were, "I love you, and so does God." And although that response flowed from my heart and out of love, we unfortunately were in two very, very different places. Because later, after Tyler had died, I did get to see a text that he had sent a week after that comment. And what I spoke out of love to encourage Tyler, he apparently heard as condemning. And a friend tried to sort it out for me and help me by telling me that Tyler probably perceived my words as rejecting, since he had been taught that God did not accept him or his sexual orientation. How terribly sad and heartbreaking for me to understand that now. What's also sad and unfortunate is that we never really had time to sort through that conversation or speak about any of the events that evening, or the conversation that evening, because things were quickly happening. There was last-minute packing to do. There was time Tyler went to say goodbye with his friends, lunches and dinners, and of course our traditional family meal together out at a restaurant the evening before. I think I started that with his older brothers. It works out well going out to eat. And then the big move into his dorm, just 36 hours after that conversation. And although we talked by phone and text, we didn't talk about the important issues. And maybe that silence of not talking about the issues had a bearing on Tyler. Because I guess we didn't speak because I still had no theological words to support him. And just talking on the phone about his faith and questioning it, it seemed like those conversations should have been in person and not via a phone or a text. I guess I thought we had a lifetime to figure out those little details in life. But quickly, and unbeknownst to me, things were moving very quickly and unraveling for Tyler at school. And our marathon of a lifetime together became a very short sprint to the finish line. And the imperfect storm was happening, and my world was quickly shattered apart. After Tyler's death, there was much to sort through and much to figure out. The issues of death, loss, grief, mental health, depression, suicide, trauma, shock, my own total despair and desperation. I was struggling with so many issues and feelings, and it usually led to many, many questions, which always seemed to take me into a downward spiral, into a really dark and sad place. But what I seemed to need to figure out and find answers to was, did God really, truly love all of his children? And did that mean my children too? Because as I told you before, but my older son, James, is also gay. And even in the deep fog and haze that I was in, I knew that I just couldn't sit back and watch James be hurt and harmed. And in all truthfulness, I guess I needed to find peace with another burning issue. And that was, if there was no room for Tyler in the body of Christ, then how could there be room for me? Because maybe there wasn't. But in those early dark days, I knew for sure one thing and one thing only, and that was that God was with me, and he was holding me tightly and holding me close to his chest, and he was walking with me through my dark moments. Because initially, I was just so numb and totally paralyzed, I was unable to focus or think or read those long theological explanations or comprehend the debates. So what I had to do was just go right to the source, and I wanted to see exactly what it said again in those clobber verses. But interestingly, as I think back, it was, as I searched for them, God always distracted and redirected me. It's amazing how I knew exactly where they were, but I just always ended up on verses that spoke about God's hope and God's strength that I was in need of. And of course, the peace that passes all understanding. That's what I was searching for. And also love, God's love, and the need to share God's love with other people. And God definitely showed me much about the outpouring of love and how he used his people to share it. Because he surrounded our family with a large outpouring of love. Our family was warmly welcomed and embraced into the LGBTQIA community, as well as our faith community surrounded us and embraced us, the faith community that Tyler had called home for 12 years. They showered our family with great love and support after Tyler's death, and I'm truly grateful for that. But I think they were supporting us in our loss, and they unfortunately could not support us as a family in the issues of inclusion and welcoming. And as I think back to our old faith community, unfortunately I realize now, or maybe back 3 or 4 years, that there was a subtle, occasional, quiet message preached, a message that maybe even some of you are familiar with, the love the sinner but hate the sin message. A message that someone who was gay was broken and separated from God for just being who they were created to be. It was only after Tyler had died that I could look back and see and understand why Tyler seemed to think that he could not be gay and be Christian, and where he had to make a choice between his faith and who God had created him to be. I also came to realize that it wasn't just on the occasional message on Sunday morning sermon where Tyler might have heard that message. Because after September of 2010, when I was going through Tyler's belongings, when I was going through his Bible, I found some papers that made it much more clear for Tyler. Papers that spelled things out, such as how homosexuality was a sin and how it was something that excluded someone like Tyler from God's kingdom. Papers that he must have gotten at Sunday school or at youth group, papers that I didn't even know he had. And then, of course, there was the silence. As I think back in my head, in my memory of looking around at the picture that Tyler must have been seeing week after week, there were no role models for him to look at. There were no gay couples worshiping in our church. There were no gay families. There weren't even people that would talk about gay families or friends. And I started seeing things as if through Tyler's eyes. And I realized how all that silence probably spoke volumes to Tyler, shouting a message of silent, shameful disapproval of how God had created him. And now I understand that I, too, had been absorbing those messages. Some quieter than others, but they were all very significant. All that silence, along with those occasional words, had a direct impact on all of us. Tyler, myself, my older sons, and my husband. And I had learned what was expected of me and what was accepted of my behavior. Because after Tyler came out, I too remained silent. I didn't tell anyone except my husband. After all, I didn't want anyone to judge Tyler. That was part of what I was thinking. But also, I think if I really take an honest look, I also suppose I didn't want them to judge me either, right? Again, I just wish I had been better prepared to encourage Tyler in his faith, and prepared to answer all my own questions and insecurities. I remember thinking things like, did I do something wrong? Did I cause this in my child or children? Did I need to choose between my faith and my son? How could God, a loving God, ask a mother to choose between God and her son? He wouldn't provide the son if he would ask that or expect that. And I am so very, very grateful to the family, my faith community family, for the love and support that they did show us, and they showered on our family. But again, it was in our loss. They just couldn't support me in my quest for the truth. They thought that they were acting out of love. I remember one pastor kept saying, these are not my words, these are God's words. And then they would continue with, it's right here in black and white, Jane. Read it for yourself, it's right here. And after Tyler died, there was another quiet, subtle message that I received from some of my brothers and sisters in Christ. And that was, as they would tell me how they're praying for me and my family, they seemed to always need to add in at the end, and we are really praying for James. That was their silent code words for James is broken and separated from God. He needs to repent and make better choices. It's amazing how you can have those silent messages mixed in there. And I was too weak and too broken at the time to even engage in any kind of a debate. So I would just smile, because I did know that my God did answer all prayers, and that I knew that God would turn that prayer back on them and transform them, because they were the ones who needed to be changed, because there was nothing that James needed to change about. They truly did think that they were acting out of love with their stance on homosexuality. But God was at work showing me that love does not harm, and it doesn't damage, and it doesn't hurt, and it doesn't injure. And in those early days, I was so numb and foggy, I just was confused, and everything seemed turned upside down and inside out in my head. And I was not able to decipher good things from bad things. And I needed a simple tool to figure these things out. And of course, God provided that for me. I came across this very simple verse that changed everything for me. It was Jesus speaking in the book of John, saying that it's the thief that comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But it's I, Jesus, that come to give life and give it abundantly. And I had my answer. Whenever I was uncertain if I should participate in something or do something or think a certain way, I would just measure it by that verse. Did it give life? Or did it steal and kill and destroy me, my family, or any of my loved ones? And then it became perfectly clear to me that preaching a message of disapproval and separation from God because of who God had created someone to love was a message of judgment, shame, and destruction. It was not a message of life and love for Tyler or any other gay person in our church or sitting in those pews. It's also a harmful message for parents and grandparents and siblings and friends to hear. Because as I started working in the area of anti-bullying, I could see the direct correlation between that type of preaching and bullying behavior. Preaching like that sends a clear message to all the straight youths in the pews. It changes their hearts and causes them to be hardened and creates a whole new generation of people filled with bias and discrimination and hate. Our youth take the words that are preached on Sunday morning right back to the classrooms and to the dorm rooms. And it tells the straight kids that the gay-focused bullying is acceptable and that saying those terrible homophobic words or setting up that camera is okay. And there is no love exhibited by these words or actions. They are words that steal away people's joy and destroy lives. And it became very clear to me that this type of interpretation was simply not God's truth. But for me, the deciding issue actually that allowed me to leave and kind of pushed me out of my faith community was actually marriage equality. It was a simple, concrete issue that I could wrap my foggy head around. Because in the spring of 2012, our governor of the state of New Jersey had the ability to sign marriage equality into law, which he did not, by the way, even though the polls in our area showed that the people of New Jersey wanted to have marriage equality. It was at that point in time that one of my pastors decided to preach on marriage. Interesting timing. It was a general message on marriage, but he had to include a few specific sentences about what the church definition of what marriage was and it was not. I think the pastor was being kind, and he thought he was being kind and generous by saying, if need be, civil unions were all right, but certainly and absolutely not marriage. I can remember those words. And as I think about it now, I guess what caused me the most pain in 2012 was, sadly, I could relate to those words. It struck a chord deep inside me, and I didn't like that feeling. Because I could remember a time when I actually probably thought just like what the pastor had been preaching. And interestingly, even though I didn't have much time to think about Tyler, and he was only 18, marriage wasn't even an issue for him. He didn't even have a boyfriend at the time. But one of the thoughts in those few weeks was, well, I love Tyler, and I want to embrace him and show him support, but what does that look like? Because I know I couldn't have supported him in a marriage because I didn't think that that was possible. So that's why I think when my pastor was preaching on it in 2012, fast forward, at a time when I was less foggy and I had new ears to listen with, maybe I was listening with Tyler's ears, Or maybe I was listening through the life and stories of the many, many new friends that I had acquired in those few years. Or maybe after spending so much time with God in His Word as I searched for His peace and for His healing from all the pain, maybe now I was hearing things through God's ears. After all, I had read over and over again about God's mercy and God's love and God's justice. And I just simply could not find any mercy, love, or justice in denying someone their basic human right to marry someone who they love. I might have been able to accept if the pastor didn't want to marry someone, but the fact that he was preaching that no one, and he wanted to influence legislators so that no person could be married, I just could not accept that. And also the fact that not even worse than marriage is that they didn't want to provide basic protections for all people, for schooling, health, for housing, for employment. And that was just something that was wrong. Just because of who God created someone to love did not allow this pastor in my head to be able to preach in this way. It was just something that was wrong. And I am so glad that my eyes were open because, as I said, my older son is gay, and in February of 2015, he was married to the love of his life, and I was so glad to be able to partner with him and Ramon, and our whole family was together to participate in showing that love as they joined together in marriage, and it was wonderful. So as difficult as it was for Yet to have another loss, I needed to move on from that faith community, and that we had been attending for many years at that point, probably about 14 years. But I needed to find a place that would focus on the essentials of our faith, sharing the good news of the true gospel message of peace and of hope and of life and love. And because I know that I would not be here today if God had not reached down and put me back together. So I truly encourage, I know that by finding that place of a new faith community, I really encourage everyone to find a faith community that focuses on those important elements of faith, of our shared faith. They are out there. It might be harder to find in some areas of our country, but they are out there. And for anyone who's struggling with family members, I would hope that you be encouraged, because God is working to transform people all the time. Just look at me. I am a perfect example of His mighty power and love, because I know I would not be here today without His love and without Him holding me together and putting me back piece by piece. As He says, He goes before all things and He holds all things together, and that all things even includes me, a broken, troubled person that I am. But it is these blessings and truths that I have learned to hold on to, because if I hold on to these gifts, then it simply makes less room for all those terrible questions that I seem to still come up with and that take me down into that terrible, horrible pit. All those unanswered, painful questions like, why didn't I know what was happening with Tyler at school? I was his mom. I was supposed to know everything, right? I could have done something if only I had known. But I've learned that I just have to let go and let God be God, and because God is in control, and it's certainly not me. And even though the focus of our organization we started to honor Tyler focuses on ending all online and offline bullying, I do believe the root of much of what we are working on stems from religious dogma and tradition. So I encourage you to join with us to put an end to bullying behavior that demoralizes and destroys the most vulnerable among us by continuing to share your stories and move the conversation forward. I am confident that God will use all of our stories to open the eyes and transform his entire body of believers to see the foolishness of interpreting Scripture with the eyes of a first-century person, but rather to use all the knowledge and wisdom that God continually lavishes on us to see life through the 21st century, to fully understand his will and desire to have a fully inclusive church for all of his children. And the good news is that even though there is still work to be done, the good news is that we have made great progress in recent years. So please keep sharing your stories. And now that you've heard my story, I hope that over the course of the weekend, you will all share your stories with me. I look forward to meeting each of you, and I look forward to hearing your stories. So please stop by and talk with me. And in support of the mission of the Tyler Clementi Foundation, I do encourage everyone to always use social media wisely and for good. So, of course, use social media for the Gay Christian Network, but also check us out on the web as well, the Tyler Clementi Foundation at tylerclementi.org. You can pledge to be an upstander, someone who stands up and speaks out when they see someone else being humiliated or bullied. And also like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And I thank you for listening, and have a great conference. Thank you.